Hey, what's up, guys? Thank you so much for checking this out. Thank you so much for watching the YouTube videos and subscribing, following me. Definitely check me out on Instagram. All of the links are in the bio at the bottom. Uh, yeah, so my name's JP, and this is Who Dares Wins. And podcast started in 2018. We're in 2023. And recently, I've been like incorporating sports and different kinds of interests that I have and passions that I have. I feel like the podcast has always talked about culture and religion and these kinds of things. But I think it's really, as I do it more, it's like coming more and more together. And the way it's coming together is um, because I'm starting to realize more and more like who I am and where I'm coming from. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that, I got introduced to punk rock in the 90s. I got my first tape in the 80s when Slippery When Wet came out by John Bon Jovi, um, who is from New Jersey, if you don't know. John Bon Jovi is right here from New Jersey. And so that was my introduction to rock and roll. And then a couple years later, I got Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. And after getting Appetite for Destruction, I wanted to be Axl Rose. I wanted to be cool like Slash, you know. I wanted to like wear the bass and like have it like hang low. Later on, I'd realized that some of that came from Duff having an influence in punk and hardcore. He was actually one of the only members of Guns N' Roses that actually had a connection to hardcore in that time. Um, so yeah, so from like the 80s and stuff, I got into Guns N' Roses. From Guns N' Roses, I got into Led Zeppelin, which I learned about classic rock. From classic rock, I got into, um, or was it the other way around? Nope, nope, nope. From classic rock, I got into grunge, grunge and alternative with Nirvana and Pearl Jam and those kinds of bands. Like especially Nirvana, was like obsessed with Kurt Cobain, and then from Kurt Cobain to punk, and from punk to hardcore, and all of the different genres and everything that comes from punk and hardcore and those kinds of things. So I got into ska, got into reggae, got into rockabilly, got into psychobilly, got into country, and then also at those very same time, I was getting into hip hop and rap music. And so I don't claim to be an expert on that. I'm not at all. I just like what I like. But as a skateboarder, which I got into skating in the 90s, I'm not a skater anymore. I mean, like if I had a board, like I guess I'd ride it, but um, kind of like hung up my skate shoes um, in like 2005, I think. And so, yeah, I I really love the fact that like skating combined, like it brought punks and hardcore kids and metalheads and um together with hip hop. So like Public Enemy, like Rage Against the Machine, Zack de la Rocha, different hip hop groups. There seemed to be like an intersection between the music through the like the outlet of skating. And then during that time period, like Kareem Campbell was skating, and of course we had Zoo York and I can't think of the guy's name right now, but he died in the movie Kids around that time. I forgot his name, but he used to ride for Zoo York, and yeah, and so like everything, there was like this whole like intersection of all those things, and and so like music, right? So I get into punk and metal and everything like that, and 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 at the same time as that's happening, I'm also getting into sports. And as I get into sports sort of like helped me to feel like I had a connection with people in the community. Sports was like, even if you were poor, and so was music, similar, especially punk. Like even poor, like you could still have a hold of this. Like you could still be a part of this community. You could still be a part of this expression, and so like from the earliest stages, and why I'm recording this is because I wanted to share with you a story of how, in high school, I was in high school in like 94, 90. I was in high school for a while because I failed a lot. Not a lot, but like at least twice, I think. Until eventually I got my GED. But didn't like school too much. And I only played 1 year of basketball in high school. So, but I got cut because I had bad grades, and it's kind of sucks, right? Because my basketball coach was my biology teacher, and I was failing biology, and he would ask me to come for office hours, and he'd be like, Jay, what, like, John, what's going on, do you want to play basketball? And I'm like, yeah, I want to play basketball. And he's like, well, you got to do good in biology. Like, how are you failing biology? I'm like, your teacher, you know what I mean? Like, I'm your coach and I'm your teacher. Like, and like, other players on the team, they were doing good. They were doing good in biology. And I just told him, like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't understand science. I don't understand it. It just makes no sense. And so, eventually I just kept skating, and I was doing drugs and things like that, and I failed. And so I was failing the class. He was like, "Yeah, you're failing the class. Like you can't be on the team anymore." And it was really unfortunate because I had another friend. I had another friend named Chris, and he was really good in basketball. Really good. He was good in basketball. He was good in soccer. He was good in like every sport he tried. He was so good. He was a good mechanic. Like he had like the dopest car in the town, and and he got cut too because he was failing, and he was failing a lot because he wasn't even coming to school. And what I later found out, what we found out was that he was having trouble at home, and one of the experiences that he had was that like his brother was murdered, and so that had a big impact on him. So it's like he was extremely skilled, and he was an awesome skateboarder and an awesome snowboarder too, and like he was always like going and doing competitions to try and get sponsored. And but I think ultimately, like the trauma from losing his brother, it just really impacted him, and he didn't pay attention in school, and he didn't even really come to school. And I'm not sure how he got his money, but he got his money, and so he fixed up his car, and yeah. Anyway, so he was really good in sports, and I brought him up because he was really good in sports, but he got cut as well. And so we're both like cut, and it was interesting to see like who made the team and who continued. And I just like wasn't good at school. I just wasn't good at school. I just wanted to play sports. I just wanted to play basketball. And then like I tried to go out for volleyball because I was like, at least I'll do something in school. And like, but I'm not even good in volleyball. And I was like, what? I'm not good in anything. But luckily, like one of the things I did have was that like I loved punk, and I skated at that time too. And so I had punk, and I was skating. I was into hardcore. And then one of the things that I discovered too from hardcore was that there was the youth crew movement, and that's how I learned about straight edge. Is that like youth crew was like, jocks who listened to hardcore and punk, and so it was wild. It was kind of like when hardcore started to become like really metal. So you'd be in a hardcore show or a punk rock show, and you'd see dudes and girls like wearing jerseys, and I was just like, what? Like, you can be into punk and sports? What? It was really shocking to me. So I'm gonna do a little little rewind, and I'm gonna say that the reason why it was so shocking to me was because when I was in high school in Schenectady, a few years before that, I was failing. I was not doing well. I was tiny. I was a super skinny guy, and I remember being into punk and being into like alternative and like Smashing Pumpkins and these kinds of things, and and I was like really popular with like the freaks or like and like grunge kids and stuff like that, and but the more I got to know them, and they were really into art too, and they were really talented, really gifted, the more I hung out with them, the more I realized, like, one, I don't think I have an artistic bone in my body, outside of like clothing or something, that I could be that could be wrong, but I don't think I feel like that. Maybe, I don't know. I appreciate it. I love artists. Artistic women are beautiful. All that. But you can't. If you ask me to draw something, I can't draw it. If you ask me to paint, I can't paint. Like if you ask me, maybe I could write. Maybe. I used to think I was a really good writer. I don't know. I think it was just like in my head. But I really loved how artists look. I love how punk rockers looked. I loved how there was something to it. There was a creativity to it. There was an imagination to it. And if anything, maybe like how I do ministry isn't a creative outlook or a creative outlet for me. And so I'll just never forget this. So it was around the time that Kurt Cobain had committed suicide. And we would all be like meeting up, and everyone was doing drugs. And we would all be talking about, how sad we are with the loss of Kurt Cobain. But granted, I liked sports, and so one of the things that I would do is that I would wear or pack in my backpack clothes to play basketball, and so I would leave school, leave my friends, and I would go to the next town, Niskayuna, and I would go and play against all the guys on the basketball court. Anyone, whoever's on the court, I didn't care who it was. Sometimes I play everyone on the court at the same time, me versus all of them, and whatever. Who maybe Niskayuna wasn't that good at basketball. I don't know, but anyway, I would just go there to get that outlet because I loved playing ball. I loved playing ball. I loved shooting the basketball. Yeah, I was just like, I wanted to be Michael Jordan. I was like, oh, I'm a white dude. I want to be like Mike. Michael Jordan he's it. He's why I picked up the basketball. It was Michael Jordan. And so the reason why I said all of this is because I'm seeing that in the podcast what's happening is there's a convergence happening. There's like a relationship happening where like music and sports and different kinds of influences that I have from culture are converging. And I think I'm learning and starting to understand more and more where the podcast is going, where we might be heading. And so, yeah, so I think that like going forward, like you're going to be hearing more of like that particular take. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. But I wanted to share that because it's kind of like, I think all of us are not just one thing. I think there's many things that happen or that we experience that makes us who we are. And that's how we show up. That's how we show up to life. And I think a big part of me is punk and hardcore and these kinds of things, music. And a big part of me is sports and football and basketball. I love basketball. I love it. I love football too. Like I wanted to be Deion Sanders. But like my favorite player of all time is Lawrence Taylor, but I wanted to be Deion Sanders. And, yeah, so I just wanted to share that. I want to share that, like, maybe you're like me and, like, you have a punk rock background and you liked sports. And maybe, like, you grew up and you felt like you were ashamed for liking sports. Or maybe you were really into sports and then you discovered punk, but it might have not been like really popular with your other teammates. and so you kind of felt ashamed that you liked punk or something that wasn't generally like popular or pop culture. Because think about this: if you've made it this far in the video, or you're listening, like punk, hardcore, metalcore, screamo, you know, rap, um, like, street rap, you know what I mean? Gangster rap, stuff like that. That was not popular. That was not popular. If anything, in a way, like Dr. Dre helped that crossover, because the Chronic just was just like banger after banger, and everyone got into it. Everyone, white folks were into it. You know what I mean? And then like with punk and stuff, it's like I felt like the crossover was like, we had the Ramones, we had different things like that, but like I think Green Day was a crossover, and then after Green Day was Blink-182 a couple years later, and like through the rise of those bands, it just became like pop culture, and by the 2000s, we had everything, right? Like, so post-hardcore became kind of like what this emo stuff is, but not DC emo, like emo, like Taking Back Sunday, which is kind of like we're influenced by hardcore, we're influenced by alternative, we're influenced by grunge, we're influenced by, DC emo, you know what I mean, and just kind of became this outlet, and so it wasn't necessarily like true and pure like I grew up with in the 90s and those before me. That time period was so like if you were into punk, you had to be into punk. But if you got into Earth Crisis, then you're not into punk anymore, which is retarded. But that's the way people used to think. That's the way I used to think. Why? Because in order to be popular, or in order to have friends, or in order to like not be a weirdo, even though you're a freak, like you're like freak in the sense of like, no, a punk rocker, and like norms are calling you a freak, and they're like saying like, oh, you dye your hair and you do this and you have piercings and all these things, like, that's like that's generally what uh yeah, it's generally what we would call freaks, right? So there's a show called Geeks and Freaks, or Freaks and Geeks, yeah. Similar, when you watch that, you would understand. Or like if you watch My So-Called Life with Jared Leto and Claire Danes. Yeah. So like Jared Leto, he played like a grunge kid who was like, they would identify as a freak, right? And then the Geeks, which was Brian, or as Jared would call him, Brain. Brian was Claire Danes' friend. He was super smart and nerdy, and he like loved Claire Danes, but she was in love with the character played by Jared Leto, and so anyway, so that was similar to it, and I felt like that show also was like very honest and true to what was going on in my time period. Yeah, it used to be. It was like so accurate that I couldn't help but feel like, yo, is this show being written by a high schooler? I was so shocked, I was so shocked. But yeah, that's how it is. So I just wanted to share that, just like a little bit of background on like what I'm feeling, like this convergence of music and sports, and that like this wasn't always a popular thing. This wasn't like, it wasn't popular to like these things. If you were an art student, if you were a punk rocker, like if you were a writer, you were like probably more thoughtful, and you considered sports like a jock sport and like dumb, right? Like people that do sports are dumb, but they're athletic. And then like sports people were like, you're nerdy, or like, like you're not attractive, or like, you know what I mean, like you're not cool, you know what I mean. And so like you don't get sports, like you don't understand sports, but I think as time has progressed, we're like able to appreciate all of that, and it still blows my mind today that like we're able to appreciate all of that. It also blows my mind that we weren't able to appreciate all of it. just kind of shows the progression of people, of human beings, and yeah, and that's interesting. So that's interesting. So anyway, thanks for listening, and yeah, man, if you like punk, cool. If you like sports, cool. If you like both, cool, awesome. You can do whatever you want and be whoever you want to be. Um, yeah, and if you're afraid, do it. Do it anyway. You have nothing to lose but your fear.